Azikiwe, thank you. Thank you for coming in and joining us. And
My pleasure.
so,
Thank you.
yes, yes. And you as well have been associated with Remembrance for many years and even as one of our organizers of the Remembrance program. But before we get into that, would you just introduce yourself, where you are, your occupation, and anything else that you think you might need that we might need to know about you as way of introduction? Thank you.
Thank you. Again, thanks for having me. My name is Azikiwe Chandler. I'm the eldest son, firstborn of Osei and Sadiqa Chandler. I am an educator, currently teaching seventh grade math or middle school math in Kuwait at the American School of Kuwait, and former chair for the Remembrance program.
Okay, so you are in Kuwait currently?
Yes.
Okay. And how long have you been there?
We've been here for about a year and a half now, just about 2 years. We came in August of 2018.
Okay. So before we get into, we want to talk a little bit about your travel. Not even a little bit, a lot about your travel, because you've done a lot of traveling. So I want to focus on that a little bit. But can you just give us your thoughts about the importance of honoring the ancestors?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of quotes. I think John Clarke talks about, says that if the Atlantic were to dry up, there'd be a route of bones. You could follow a map of bones from the coast of Africa to the Americas, and those would be the bones of Africans who jumped ship or were thrown overboard. So those are our ancestors, and we would not be here if not for them. Then there are those who made it here and also passed away. But there's a strength in our ancestors, and I think it was Tony Bambara who said that, I believe that's her name. You might have to fact check that one.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Thank you very much. Who said that we need to draw upon that strength. And then I think it was Toni Morrison who said that we don't have a marker. So again, it's simply a matter of recognizing that our ancestors, our strength, our survival, the fact that we are here is a result of them having been before us. And Pop always says that, we're not victims, we're beneficiaries of their sacrifices, of their strength, and of their wisdom and guidance. And so those are the things that we want to call upon to guide us now in this current age, to help us. We have to pay those respects, but also to draw upon that strength for all of the challenges and whatnot that we still face.
You were a really good organizer for Remembrance, and we really appreciated having you. It was at that point that your dad and me, the two co-founders, two of the co-founders of Remembrance, we were trying to retire, and you came on board and were really good. And I do credit you with bringing on a different kind of an audience, changing the whole, scheme, the landscape of Remembrance up quite a bit. So tell us, could you share some of the highlights of your experience as being an organizer for Remembrance, and some of the things that you did and what you noticed about it previously, and some things that you did that might have helped change it up a little bit?
Well, first of all, I have to say that it was an honor to be involved. Again, I think that it's very important that what you and Pop started there in Charleston was simply an extension of what had been going on in other parts of the world. And so to let it fall by the wayside, I think would have been a tragedy. So I was honored to be able to be home and be able to step into that space and contribute. For me, one of the biggest, I might say disappointment, but I'm not sure if that's the correct word, but was that there weren't enough people attending, or that there wasn't enough knowledge about it. And so when I was tapped to take the helm, I took the challenge to make the awareness greater, to make more people aware that this is what was happening, and that this was something that was important for us to take part in. And so I simply reached out to a few more organizations and media outlets to get the word out. And I think that people were receptive, because again, the knowledge was there, and I didn't have to create anything. The blueprint was already in place. It was just a matter of using the megaphone to make sure that other people were aware and more people knew when it was taking place, and to mark it on their calendars and then show up accordingly.
And it was really effective, because that first year that you came on board, I mean, we did notice a larger amount of people coming out, and also a younger audience as well, and that was really important. And we maintain that until this day. It has really grown. You know, bringing in Asala, and of course bringing in Brenda Peart, and you know, with her energy and her really advancing us on social media has really helped as well. So we're really grateful to that. I think when I came to Charleston, were you in Asia at the time? That was before Nicaragua, right? That was before you began those travels.
What year was it?
About 97.
So 97.
97. You weren't in town yet, I don't think. You were a legend. I heard about you. You know,
I think in 97 I was in.
From your mother and your father, but I think, were you ever in Asia, Japan, or someplace or something like that?
I taught in Korea for a couple of years.
It was Korea. That's Korea. Okay,
right.
That's okay.
But Korea was 05. If we're talking about 97, I was probably in Europe at the time.
It's like almost like you've been to every continent, you know. So just a little bit of analogy of all of that and what's going on there.
Brother Zeke, I'm gonna have to use this point as a marker, and my lead in is why it is important for a Black man to have a passport. Bang.
Oh, okay, that's a good one too. Yes, go right ahead. Yeah.
Well, first I have to. So the story might be a little bit longer than you want it to be, but
no,
I have to begin.
It's okay. Let it roll. Let it roll. Let it roll.
I'm going on mute. I'm going on mute so I can hear this. Okay.
Right. I mean that. Sister Regina's in the cut. We all here for you, brother. Listen. Come on, son.
All right. Well, I appreciate.
I come here to see you. Heard that you grew up in all this, and you got to see what your parents did. So your life isn't, for us, your life doesn't start just with Middle Passage Remembrance. From what I know of your mother, and I never met her, okay, but from what I know of your father and from what I've seen of the family, I see the ambassadors that they sent out into the world. So, and here we go, the ambassador, the international Black man. There you go.
Too kind. Well, it began with mom and pop, as you said. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. I was a product of the East and the Uhuru Sasa in Brooklyn, New York. So it was a collective of African Americans who got together and decided that they needed to educate their children because they couldn't allow, or they couldn't count on the public education system to teach us what it was that we needed to know about ourselves. When we moved to Charleston, I was about 6 or 7 years old. And, we went from Uhuru Sasa, and I remember going to Pepper Hill Elementary School, where I got into a fight the first day because, it was a white boy pointing to the globe and looking at a river in Africa, Niger River. And he said, look, it's an inward river in Africa. And he looks at me, points to the river, and starts laughing. And so I ended up punching him in his face and then sent home with a pink slip. And then, a few weeks later, I got in trouble again for fighting another white boy who jumped me in line. And so I was coming home with headaches, migraines, and that kind of stuff. And because I stopped getting into trouble, I didn't want to make mom and pop have to keep coming to school. So I stopped fighting and just kind of internalized it. But mom and pop, they know everything. They're smart. They're watching us. And they could see what was going on. And so they realized that they needed to give us those same lessons that we weren't getting from Uhuru Sasa anymore. So that while we were learning about, Benjamin Franklin and George Washington in school, we came home to learn about George Washington Carver and Benjamin Banneker. And so that was a kind of upbringing that I had. In addition to that, they monitored everything that we ingested. So, you know, that was from the books that we read to what we watched on television, to the food that we ate. You know, if we ate too much salty food or sugary food, then we were going to have health issues. If we watched, you know, garbage TV, then we would have, you know, rotten minds. So we couldn't watch Tarzan and any of that kind of foolishness. But we could read just about anything that we wanted. And so one of the things, you know, I love comic books, but also National Geographic magazine. So we had a subscription to that. And I was, you know, I just always had these notions in my mind. I would read about these far off places and think, man, I want to learn another language. I want to see what that culture is about. What can we learn from this place? And so I had those ideas in my mind, along with, you know, watching Jacques Cousteau. We could watch the nature shows and PBS programs. So Nova, Wild Kingdom, those kind of things. And so Jacques Cousteau was a diver, and I always wanted to, I said, one of these days I'm going to learn how to dive as well. One of these days I'm going to be on safari in Africa, jump with the Maasai, things along those lines. And so these were the dreams that I had, even though, you know, I didn't have a passport, didn't know anybody who had a passport. You know, I think I had a godfather who spoke Spanish, but we didn't spend a lot of time with him. So it wasn't even like I knew other people who spoke other languages. So, you know, a lot of folks, you know, when I would tell people that I was going to travel, you know, they'd laugh and be like, my friends in school, how you going to do that? You ain't got no money. And rich people do that kind of stuff. But I held fast to that dream. And, you know, I was just writing my cousin today, actually. She just graduated from high school, and I sent her a bunch of books. And one of them was The Alchemist, because the general premise of the book is that if you have a dream and work earnestly to achieve that dream, then the universe conspires to make it happen. And so that, to me, that was my life. So I graduated from Burke High School, had a scholarship to Notre Dame, and studied architecture at Notre Dame. Everybody who studies architecture at Notre Dame spends a year in Rome, Italy. So that was my first entree, my first experience abroad. And again, I didn't know how it was going to happen, but it's just a part of the program. So that's my first experience abroad, studying architecture at Notre Dame. When I graduated, I knew that I wanted to join Peace Corps, because I thought that would be another way for me to get out and see the world without actually carrying a gun and threatening people. And so I figured I would join Peace Corps, but I could not live with myself if I went to a foreign country and worked on the issues that were plaguing those foreign countries without first working at home. So, you know, I was raised according to the principles of the Nguzo Saba. Kuumba is one of my favorites, to do as much as we can in the way that we can to make our communities more beautiful and beneficial than when we inherited them. And that was what we were doing in Charleston, what my parents did, you know, through the Ebony City Soccer Club, Lil Pele's, through Roots Music Karamu, through the Moja Arts Festival, and the list goes on and on, Remembrance programs. So they were always involved with that kind of stuff in Charleston. And, you know, being their son, I had to be involved as well. But branching out from Charleston, I wanted to get away from Charleston. So AmeriCorps was an opportunity to work in communities. Here in Charleston, I actually did my first year at the Charleston base, and then I did the second year in Colorado. Now, AmeriCorps NCCC, the National Civilian Community Corps, focuses on community service in 4 areas: unmet human needs, education, the environment, and I believe health. It's been a while since I've done the recruitment for them. But we worked on a number of projects here in Charleston, and then I loved it so much that I did a second year at the base in Denver. Now, that experience of working with youth and also because I had studied in Italy, I spoke Italian. And so I led a trip. My first trip was with a program called the U.S. Experiment in International Living. And so I led a trip to Italy, and I took a group of high school students on a 5 or 6 week trip to Italy in the summer of '95. And then the ball was rolling after that. I led a few more trips to Italy. I joined Peace Corps. I was an urban youth development volunteer in Bluefields, Nicaragua from 1998 until 2000. When I finished that up, I now spoke Spanish and wanted to see the rest of Central America. Now, what I was hoping for when I joined Peace Corps was, 1, to be in a Spanish-speaking country, but 2, to work with people of African descent. And again, the universe conspired to make it happen. I was sent to Nicaragua, and on the east coast of Nicaragua is where you find many people of African descent. They ended up there the same way that we ended up here in the United States. And so Bluefields was the city in which I worked, and it was Black. And so I didn't know, I mean, I knew a little bit about it before I went, but I found out more once I was there. And then I was intrigued. I said, well, now I want to see all of these Black folks in Central America. So I finished up my Peace Corps service, went down to Panama, and then took chicken buses. They call them chicken buses because you might be on a bus with a chicken on your lap, because they're all converted school buses, et cetera. So I went all the way down to Panama and then came up the Central American Isthmus, hitting all of what I call La Ruta Negra. So La Ruta Maya is where everybody goes to see all of the Mayan ruins in Central America, but I wanted to see all of the Black communities in Central America. So I made my way from Panama and hit each country, traveling up the East Coast, and hitting all of the Black communities along the way. And it was a beautiful experience, loved it. So that was 98 to 2000. Came back and worked with AmeriCorps again, but this time instead of leading a team, I was the project director. So I developed all of the projects that the Corps members in Washington, D.C. worked on. Did that for a couple of years and then felt like the road was calling me again. So gave up the office job, picked up the backpack again, and started taking groups of kids on trips around the world once more. So this time, instead of doing high school trips that were just, 5 to 7 weeks, I started doing trips for college age kids, and those were 3-month trips. So my first trip was to Costa Rica, Guatemala, and what was the last one? Costa Rica, Guatemala, and it wasn't Nicaragua. I have to think about it. My next trip was to Fiji, New Zealand, and Australia, and then I led another trip. I think those were the only 2 trips I led. Bolivia, Peru, and Ecuador. So I led.
You had to get to Paparoncon territory somewhere.
So I led several trips that way, and then decided, okay, I need to make a little bit more money because those trips are not very, they don't pay well, but you don't have many expenses. So I was young, didn't have a house or a car. And so it was easy because I didn't, have many expenses. So then it was time to sit down again and try to make a little bit more money. And so I came back to the States, and Bush was elected. And then I decided I didn't want to live in the country while Bush was trying to start a war in the Middle East. And I didn't want any of my taxes, any of my money contributing to that. So I decided I'm not going to live in the States while he's president. And so I went out to Korea, and that's where I taught English as a foreign language for a couple of years. And from there, I traveled to Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines. And when that was done, I think he was still president. So I decided I would go to Brazil for a little while, worked on writing a book there. And then from Brazil, I got to where I really wanted to go. Finally ended up leading a trip to East Africa, to Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. Loved that. I led a couple of trips there, and when that was done, went to Ethiopia for a little while, and then to Kenya. Kept working on the book, and then came home, and then that's when Mom passed. That was 2010. So I came home for a while because we knew that Mom's cancer had gotten bad, and that was scary. I wanted to be closer to home, and so yeah, I was in Colorado when we got the diagnosis, and I got back home in time to spend the last few days with her. After she passed, put the book down and never really picked it up again. One of these days I will get back to it. And then decided that maybe it was time to start working on the school. I always felt like I wanted to start a school for African-American boys in particular, to help stem the tide from the dropout to prison pipeline. And so the objective was always to start the school. And I felt like I needed to get that piece of paperwork that said that, I knew what I was talking about. So I went back to grad school at the College of Charleston to earn a Master of Arts in Teaching, with the intention of teaching for a couple of years and, kind of getting my roots in and setting up my connections so that after a few years of teaching, I could work on designing and developing, setting up my own school. But I ended up marrying a woman who was in med school at the time. So we ended up having to go up to Massachusetts for her residency program. My daughter was born right before we went there, my oldest daughter. And so we went to Massachusetts for a couple of years. That marriage wasn't the right fit, so it didn't work out. Came back to Charleston because that was always the plan. And I expected my ex-wife to come down with my daughter. Now, here's the tripped out part. Come back to Charleston from Massachusetts. And in Massachusetts, you know, it's the #1 state for education in the country. So the way the certification works, if you get certified there, then South Carolina basically recognizes that certification and gives you the certification in South Carolina too. There's one test that you have to take that they don't have in Massachusetts that's a little bit different in South Carolina. It's called the PLT. And I took that before I went to Massachusetts because I did my homework ahead of time so that I would have that under my belt when I came back. But, you know, Charleston County School District had me jumping through a lot of hoops. The South Carolina Board of Education didn't want to recognize my certification. And so all of that was going on. In addition to that, 45 ends up being elected, and I was like, no, we're not staying here for that. Like, so there was a combination of things. There was that, and then the fact that I took a pay cut coming from Massachusetts, $10,000 less I was making in South Carolina, which meant that in order to spend time with my daughter and pay all of my bills in South Carolina, I was driving for Lyft and Uber 4 nights a week. I would leave work on Thursday and drive late Thursday night. I'd leave work on Friday and I'd drive until the wee hours of the morning, Friday night and Saturday night, and then all day Sunday. So I'm doing all of this to make ends meet. 45 gets elected, and I'm like, all right, I met my current wife. I met the love of my life, my soulmate. And when we woke up that morning and she told me that he won, I was like, no, that's not true. That's not even possible. I was like, we're gonna wait for the recount. I know she's not gonna throw in her, not gonna give up. There's gotta be a fight coming. And when she gave up, I was like, no, we can't stay. We gotta go. This makes no sense. So I started looking for international jobs and ended up landing a job in Venezuela. And, you know, it looked like it was, a lot of folks were worried about us. They thought, oh, isn't Venezuela in turmoil and crisis? And in fact, it was, but what they were offering was basically hazard pay. So when I went to Venezuela, it was making $10,000 more than I was making in South Carolina, but I didn't have to pay for the plane ticket there. I wouldn't have to pay for housing, electricity, car insurance, any of that kind of stuff. Like, they're covering everything, plus paying the 40 grand. So all of that goes in the bank. And I had more vacation time working at the International School of Monagas, which basically meant that even though I would be abroad, I would have more time with my daughter and more opportunity, the ability to get to her quicker from Venezuela than from Charleston, South Carolina. So Carmen and I got married, moved to Venezuela, did a year there, and would have stayed because we loved it. And even though the country was in crisis, I never felt endangered. When I was driving for Uber and Lyft, I kid you not 10 days went by that I didn't get stopped by cops. And I was afraid most of the time, less so when I had white passengers in the car. If I had some passengers in the car, it was good because they would always talk shit to the cops. They would be like,
this is not by the by here in Charleston?
Yeah, in Charleston. When I was driving, like I said, when I was driving for Uber and Lyft, at least every 10 days I got pulled over. And it was always BS. It was always, oh, you rolled through the stop sign, or you didn't have your turn signal on. And like I said, if I had white passengers in the car, they'd be like, oh, that's bull, that's BS. He had his turn, so he didn't roll through that. And I'd be like, I'm glad y'all can talk to him like that, because I can't. But again, it's a scary situation because I didn't always have passengers in the car. Sometimes it was just me, and I didn't know where. And I would be someplace where who knows what could happen. And when I started entertaining the thought that, one, I need to keep a weapon in the car, and two, should I use that weapon before they get a chance to use a weapon on me? Exactly. But those were the thoughts in my mind. And so it was like, yeah, we got to go. So living in Venezuela, you know, people would always say, well, wasn't it scary? Weren't you afraid? And I have to say, at no point during that year in Venezuela, did I fear for my life more than, you know, being pulled over by the cops in the US? At no point. In fact, the one time I remember one of my coworkers was talking about being hassled. So when we first moved there was an airport in the city that we lived in, Maturin, and we could fly from there back to the States. But because of the crisis, that airport ended up being shut down. And so we would have to drive 3 hours away to the next airport to fly to the States. And there was usually 1 or 2 checkpoints along the way. And so, you know, normally they would just wave me through. But one time I was coming back from the States. It was actually coming back from a job fair where I got the job that I'm working now. And when they pulled me over, you know, I got a little bit nervous because it's still the cops pulling me over. But, you know, they start cracking. They're like, hey, what do you have? And I said, I don't have anything. And all I had was my carry-on. And so they make me open up the carry-on and checking for contraband or anything like that. And there's nothing in there. And they said, well, you don't have any Jordans or anything? And I'm like, nah, sorry. He said, well, what, you got anything for us? And so, you know, people had talked about shakedowns, right? So if I'd had a little bit of cash, I would have wanted to give it to him. But the truth was I didn't have. I might have had 10,000 Bolivares or something, the equivalent of $5 or something like that. And I was like, look, man, this is all I got. You can have it. He said, well, can you, I mean, you got your credit card? Can you buy us a chicken or something like that? I'm like, sure, I can buy you a chicken. And so people, you know, would look at that. My coworker was like, man, that's BS. We shouldn't have to do that. I said, listen, if it costs me $10 to buy 2 guys 2 chickens because they're hungry, I don't have a problem with that. Not at all. I didn't fear for my life. When I got pulled over by the cops in Virginia, that ticket, because I was driving 9 miles over the speed limit, cost me $500. And again, fearing for my life, because who knows what the heck is going to happen when you get pulled over, right? So $500 versus $10, I'm going to take the $10 every day. At the end of it, they didn't take any money from me. You know, we started laughing and joking. I ended up showing them my phone because I was like, look, man, I don't have any money. I was just talking to my wife, asking her what she needs me to pick up on the way home. And so I hand them the phone thinking that, you know, even though I know they can't read English, they can at least, you know, look at the list of the grocery list. And he says, and he starts joking. He says, oh, she says that she's with your neighbor. Did you know that? And then he looks up at his friend and he's like, oh, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, he knows all of these guys. So now we're just joking. And that has been my experience abroad, that, you know, as a Black man from the United States, in the United States, we are over-policed and underprotected. But abroad, the blue passport affords us the same privilege that white people have in the States. And so, and on top of that, if you're not being a jerk about it, if you can actually have a conversation with people, you know, you end up making friends. So what he ended up doing was saying, man, we don't want any of your money, go ahead. But if you don't mind bringing us some English lessons when you come back through, we would appreciate that. And so I put some English lessons on a thumb drive. And the next time I came through, I gave him that. And we've been friends. We were friends the whole time I was there. But that was the one time that I ever got stopped and, again, never felt endangered. So that was the year before we moved here. We didn't stay, mainly because the crisis just got worse. And it wasn't that we feared for our lives there, but it ended up being that, again, the flights were fewer and far between. And when, you know, it went from being able to get home in less than 24 hours for less than $500 to having to drive to Barcelona and then spend the night there or spend the night in Miami. And so it became a 2-day trip costing $1,500. Not to mention that, you know, you had to drive all over to find food and all of that kind of stuff because, you know, things just got worse and worse. So we couldn't do another year there. And so we ended up looking for our next place, and we ended up coming here to Kuwait. And Kuwait's been good too. Again, the school pays for our nice apartment, which is at least 2 times the size of the apartment that I had in Charleston that I was struggling to pay the rent for. But here we've got a 3-bedroom, 3-bath, and life is good. We were planning on coming home. We were thinking about coming home, you know, when the pandemic hit. But you know, the United States was the epicenter, And we were like, nah, we can't subject our brand new baby girl to these diseases and viruses, not in the airports and the planes that we have to get there, and definitely not in the cities in the United States where it didn't seem that the leadership there was taking it seriously. So we decided to stay here. And now, you know, with the protests and whatnot going on, and again, the leadership seeming to want to add fuel to the fire, the U.S. just still feels too dangerous for us right now. So we'll be here for at least one more year, and then we'll figure out where we're going to go from here.
You have many young families right now like yours who are looking at the political climate in America, the social climate, what's the food like in Kuwait? I mean, just listen, just your gastronomic experiences alone. But there are many now, and you see a lot of posts. Man, as soon as they open up, I'm getting out of here. I'm looking for where I can get dual citizenship. What are the, and we've spoken with a couple in Nigeria, but we've definitely spoken with a couple who were initially Jamaican-based, who their companies in Kenya, but in Tanzania at the moment because of COVID. The realistic expectations of skill sets, entrepreneurship levels, education, what should they prepare themselves with? Not everyone's a teacher.
Right.
In order to basically compete and live globally, where they can have a sense of dignity.
That's a very good question. And to be quite honest, it's not one that I can answer for everyone, because I think it does depend on what your skill set is. I know that, you know, the way that the world is changing right now, a lot more people are working from home, which I think means that, you know, if you can figure out how to make your money online, then you can do that from anywhere. One of the reasons that education appeals to me is not only because I think that I wanted to get into it to influence young African American minds, to help build self-esteem in them so that they realize that they can accomplish whatever they want, but that I did know that I could use it anywhere in the world, that international schools existed and that teachers would be in high demand wherever. So that's one of the reasons that I chose education, because I knew that it was one of the routes to be able to get out and see the world. But in terms of, you know, what other people can do, I do know that, for instance, here in Kuwait, and Kuwait's not one of the places that I would recommend. Nothing is, I wouldn't say that anything is bad about how we're treated here, but it's the desert. So, you know, we have a lot of green plants in the apartment. You know, that was one of the things Carmen and I jumped on right from the beginning, because, you know, we felt like we needed some green around us. But, you know, it's a lot more sand than grass. And, you know, you don't see a whole lot of green trees and things like that.
So no beaches.
There were the beaches here. There's the Gulf. But the beaches that are closest to us, the public beaches, are not the ones that you really want to go to. So we have to drive out a bit to get to the beach. And right now, which is one of the things that we've gone out a couple of times, but since COVID, you know, we've been locked down. And so it's, when the lockdown is lifted, we do want to go rent a chalet and hang out at the beach for, you know, a weekend or a week or whatever. But it's not the same as, you know, say Jamaica or Costa Rica or Thailand. You know, some of the beaches in Tanzania that I've loved. So, it's okay. You'll make some money. But, you know, we definitely, our next stop, we want to be the place where we hope to buy land and live forever moving forward. So we were looking at Africa. I went to Ghana last summer, and I love Tanzania. But now, you know, with the pandemic the way that it is, and having a 7-month-old baby, healthcare is one of the things that we have to definitely be more mindful of. That, and the fact that our parents are getting older, and we want to be able to get back to them quicker, as quick as possible. So we're looking more now at the Caribbean and Latin America than the continent. Although that was our big dream for a long time. And who knows? We'll see what happens. We're going to be here for one more year, so within that time, we'll investigate a few more options.
Azikiwe, I have a question. I noticed you talk about going to the beach. So I have two questions. One, are women accepted on the beach? Can women go on the beach without being in a private chalet where you are? And also, what is the experience of your wife in these countries? I know what the dilemma is for Black males. Is she experiencing similar kinds of reactions?
Well, one of the reasons that we chose Kuwait, you know, when I left the career fair in New York, we had options for Mexico, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, China, and I can't remember the fifth place at this right now. But we ended up choosing Kuwait because it was the biggest bang for the buck. You know, we took a little bit. We would have made more money in Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia was a little bit more was restrictive in terms of women and women being out. And so we chose Kuwait because it is not as restrictive as the other countries. Now, in terms of the beach, no, women do not go to public beaches in bathing suits. And so they're fully covered if they go to the beach here, to public beaches, which is, again, one of the reasons why, you know, we do the chalet or go to one of the hotels and use their beaches. In terms of, you know, moving around outside of beaches, again, it's pretty liberal. So, you know, they don't want you wearing, you know, tight clothes or exposing your knees and shoulders, that kind of stuff. But Carmen's pretty conservative in her dress anyway. So there haven't been any problems with us when we're out and about or with her out by herself.
Thank you.
Is that it? Did I answer your question, or did I skip something?
What about in other countries that you've been in? Has that been an issue?
No, Carmen and I have only been married for a few years. So Venezuela, no, we've been married for a few years. We lived in Venezuela and we've lived here, but we've also traveled to Greece and Jordan. And no, she's breastfeeding my daughter right now, and I think my daughter's about to fall asleep. So I don't know if she's actually going to come on screen to speak for herself.
Yes, we have to hear about her Reiki program.
Yes, we need to have her come on, because one thing we do have is her dancing so beautifully on the beach in Charleston during Remembrance.
Okay.
So even if you just wave at us and say hello before we finish up, that would be great.
And we have to hear about the current campaign for her Reiki program.
Right. So I think what we'll do is we'll switch off in a few minutes here. I'll go hold Mizan, and Carmen will come in, and you can have your questions and have her speak for herself. If you're ready, I'll go get it now. If you got more questions,
we're gonna grab you for this hot second. This is I need this message to men in Charleston, men across the diaspora who don't know why they should be at Middle Passage Remembrance.
Because we have short memories. You know, these protests, you know, there's a lot of history in terms of the cyclical nature of things. And so I think if we draw upon that strength and recognize the actual history, then that strength carries us forward and not only protests a moment, but helps us transform this moment into a longer process, something that can be sustained so that we don't have to protest the same thing 5-10 years from now. And so drawing upon the strength of our ancestors, you know, near and far, I'm speaking time-wise, can bring about a certain amount of wisdom. And again, just imbue us with a certain sense of strength and fortify us, gird us in such a way that we're ready for a longer struggle, and not just try to feel like we've won this particular battle, but start making more progress towards winning the war and shifting the tide, the mindset of the country, so that we recognize our importance, what we bring, and that we don't have to be anyone's puppet. We don't have to be to subject ourselves to the whims of certain mindsets and mentalities, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes, sir. The brothers need to hear it.
Yeah. That to me is it. That to me is it. There's a lot of strength and wisdom there, and when we open ourselves up to receiving it, you know, when I said that the universe conspires to make things happen, I didn't know how I was going to be able to travel the world. I had no idea, but that was what was in my mind, and that's what, you know, I worked diligently for my studies, and then, you know, I ended up at Notre Dame and I ended up studying in Rome. That's the universe conspiring to make it happen. And I think that, you know, we don't understand the strength and power that comes from our ancestors and paying that homage to them. But, you know, when we do it, when we open ourselves up to it, we reap the benefits. And I you know, I wish I could, you know, quantify it and say it scientifically in such a way that it makes, you know, so that the scientific mind can understand it. I can't, but I can say that that's what has worked in my life.
How's the reggae scene in Kuwait?
Non-existent. But, you know, now that school is over, I'm listening to Pop Show, of course, you know, every Saturday night. I got to wake up at 5 in the morning, but I'm usually trying to put Mizan back down. She's usually getting a little gassy around that time anyway. So I listen to Pop, and you know, I hip other people to it. But I'm glad that you asked about reggae, because one of the things that it did bring to mind is that there's some Black folks here, some Jamaicans, and they have their own businesses. And so, you know, when we talk about moving forward, you know, a lot more people are talking about, you know, Ujamaa, cooperative economics, and, you know, making sure that we spend our money with Black businesses. And so that's always been a way of life for me, even here in Kuwait. So you asked about the food. We eat some Kuwaiti food, but the area in which we live there are more Indians here. And so it's easy to find more Indian food. And so I'm now, since the lockdown, we don't order out very much, but I've been making my own curries, you know, because I can find all of the ingredients here. And before that, I was ordering, you know, my coworkers are ordering from IHOP and Shake Shack and all of these places. But I would get my food once a week from the Jamaican brother that I played soccer with. He's a caterer, and he would deliver jerk ribs, jerk chicken, curry, goat, you know, at least once a week. And so, you know, I was actually upset because the first Jamaican restaurant I went to, brother wasn't Jamaican, and he was faking the funk. I gotta tell you, it upset me, because I'm like, bruh, come on, man. I'm trying to definitely patronize brothers, and here you are serving fake food. I like it. It upset me so much. And but, you know, I couldn't be that person that's like, see, that's why I don't do Black businesses. No, I'm not going to do that. I know that there's another something better out here. And then that's when I found the other brother. So so all that to say that we should always be looking first to spend our money with those who look like us, who are going to benefit from us, and make sure that our dollars are strengthening our community. And so that was just something I felt like I needed to put out there.
For your little Pele, I got you on the hot seat. Little Pele message that has the soccer ball, the football, been even when the language wasn't there. Has that been your international language through all these places? Absolutely, absolutely. It's been 45 countries now, I think, and I want to say that there were only 3 countries in which I didn't play soccer. Fiji, New Zealand, and Jordan, because I wasn't in Jordan long enough. Fiji and New Zealand, rugby is the big sport there, so I didn't get a chance to pick up there. But every place else in the world, there's always pickup soccer to be found. You spend some time walking around, you're going to come across a game, and if you got any kind of skills, even if you don't have skills, I guess they might let you play. But you got a little bit of skills, and then they invite you to come back and play again. And yes, in several places where I didn't speak the language, you know, after the game, we're hugging, we're dapping, and folks are inviting you over. Hey, come on over, have a drink. Come on over here, let's go do this. And you become a part of a community very quickly, just because you're open-minded and you're experiencing something that other people love to do. And so that makes the world a much smaller place. And, you know, Pop grew up playing basketball, and I think he wanted us to play as well. Cheo did play in high school, but
You know, I never got the ball to the rim when I was 7 years old. So it was like, all right, well, if you can't shoot the basketball, you're gonna do something. And soccer ended up being the sport. And I have to say, you know, it was another blessing in disguise. I don't know that if he thought about it that way. But yeah, it's one of those things, again, the universe conspiring to make it happen.
You speak often of community, and I noticed that you use soccer or teaching to as an entree pretty much. But I also think it sounds like your willingness to be a part of a given culture, your willingness to learn a language, to be there for people, is something that's worked in your favor and should well work in your favor. But I think in the United States, the thing that I pick up on is that there is a sense of fear as Black people, so that you are not nearly as open as one could be in building community. How do we address that? I mean, that's a rhetorical question on some level, but how do we begin to move past the fear?
Again, that's another one of those questions that is difficult for me to answer for other people because of the way I was raised. Okay. All right. So when I say that there are 5 people in my immediate family, right? Mom, pop, my brother and sister, and me. And so, but growing up, I cannot remember a time when there wasn't 6 people in the house. And it wasn't like we had an extra bedroom. That 6th person was, you know, one of Pop's friends who was sleeping on the couch in the living room. You know, there might be another Saturday morning when we wake up and we got to step over all of the band members that Pop brought to town for, you know, a reggae concert when we first moved to Charleston. It might be another friend from New York or a cousin. You know, there was always somebody else in the house. And so, you know, growing up, to a certain extent, it's like, man, we don't have enough space as it is, and now somebody else is in here. But what that did for me, I think, was, again, open up the universe for me to receive those blessings from other people in different parts of the world. And I can't tell you the number of times when people have taken me in my time of need. And so I can't tell you, you know, what it was about Mom and Pop that made them take people in the way that they did. But I think it had something to do with that mentality of the East, that mentality of Moja, you know, that we're all in this together, and that if we look out for one another, then there's more for us. And I think that's part of Black communities just in general. You know, in the South, I think, you know, if you show up at somebody's house, you know, mom, you know, big mama might say, oh, we always got, you need something to eat. You know, there's always enough food in the house, right? So I think that there's that mentality of community that has been there for a very long time. I don't want to say that we lost it. I don't believe that that's the case. I think it's just a matter of expanding it and getting back to that point where we look out for each other and each other's kids. You know, I remember coming home from school in middle school, and, you know, like most boys at that age, my brother and I did something stupid. We were out there throwing rocks at cars, and and somebody, you know, we get home and Pop says, so what happened after school today? I'm like, nothing. Y'all weren't out there throwing rocks at cars. He didn't have to tell us who said it. He didn't have to ask us any more questions. We just knew that somebody saw us and we got in trouble. But that was a community. You know what I mean? When we went, when we had the problem at Pepper Hill Elementary, Mom and Pop knew not only that they had to give us our own history and make sure that we understood that, but they also knew that we needed more of a community. And so we left Pepper Hill Elementary and started going to James Simmons Elementary. I think Mr. Nathaniel Washington was the principal at the time. And again, it was one of those environments where we knew that all of the teachers cared for us. We knew that the principal, that all the adults in the community cared about us, and that, you know, I couldn't go home and tell my dad that I got in trouble at school because the teacher didn't like me. Was never going to fly. I tried it once in high school. Chael tried it in elementary. And I didn't say that I didn't get a bad grade, but, you know, her name was Mrs. Harrison. She was the French teacher. And she cornered Pop at a PTA meeting and said, you know, Zeke is doing well in class, but, you know, I think he could be doing better. And so Pop, you know, asked me if that's true. And I said, well, come on, Pop, I speak the best French in the class. I always have the right answer. I don't know why she keeps calling on me. You know, Kenyon over there speaking Wadmalaw French, and she'll never call on it. she's always bothering me. I don't understand. And he's like, why do you think she's always calling on you? And I said, I don't know, Pop. He said, well, think about it. Why do you think? You said you got the best friends in the class. Why do you think? And that's the moment at which it concluded. Was like, okay, all right. So I need to be living up to my potential and helping the teacher help other folks. But that was that time period, right? And teaching in the United States, when I was teaching in Charleston and in Massachusetts, I remember having parents come to me. No, before that, when I was working with AmeriCorps, I ended up working at J.H. Berry Elementary School, and Mrs. Ferguson, who had been a teacher of mine at James Simmons, one of the teachers who encouraged me to write an essay for an MLK essay, and I ended up winning an essay contest, and that kind of put me on the gifted and talented track. But you know, I'm now working at this school, J.H. Berry in North Charleston, and I'm walking down the hallway, and I hear a parent just cussing out a teacher, and you know, it was so loud that I actually had to kind of backtrack and take a look in the room. And when I saw that it was a young lady cussing out Mrs. Ferguson, who I didn't know was at the school yet, I was like, Mrs. Ferguson? And so the young lady stops for a minute, and you know, we hug, and I tell her how much I missed her and I'd been looking for her for a long time, blah, blah, blah. And then I looked at the young lady and I said, listen, I don't know what's going on, but I can vouch for Mrs. Ferguson. She has your child's best interests at heart, and whatever problem that you have, if you take it down a notch and just have a conversation with her, I guarantee you that your child is going to be the beneficiary of that conversation and you trusting in her. And I'm not sure how we lost that, where it was lost, and I don't think it's lost everywhere, because I know that I've had similar conversations with parents at Charleston Progressive Academy, where I did my student teaching. Charleston Development Academy, and then also Charleston Progressive, where I actually taught for a year. And in both of those cases, I had not only parents who worked with us, but also, you know, some parents who were difficult to work with. So somewhere along the way, some of those things were lost. But again, I think the Remembrance program and programs like that, people attending Kwanzaa celebrations, movements in which we focus on unity again, help us start to build that community more. And when we're trusting each other and working together, that's when we're really unstoppable. That's when we're at our best.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. 200%.
Well, anyway, Zeke, you know, your story is fascinating.
Enlightening.
Yeah, this was really good to hear and good to share.